Hello and welcome to A Woman's Heart. I'm Lisa Granger. When we go through a tough time, we can become blinded or obsessed by everything but the pain. Angela Mackey wrestled with God in her pain of infertility and learned lessons of joy and gratitude while grieving. This was a real conversation between friends about the hard stuff in our life that can lead to a deeper relationship with God and lasting hope. I will be focusing on my family the week of Thanksgiving. So I encourage you to listen to a conversation about gratitude with Amber Cullum of Grace Enough podcast. You can also catch up on any other conversations that you may have missed. The link will be in the show notes, along with how to connect with Angela and how to connect with me. I'm available to speak on a podcast or at an event. Now for my conversation with Angela Mackey. Welcome to A Woman's Heart. We are in for a treat today. I am looking forward to it. I have a dear friend of mine here today, Angela Mackey. And thanks so much for joining us today, Angela.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. I'm excited.
You are very welcome. I am looking forward to this. You are one of the sweetest people that I know, and I read the book that you have just put out, and it really was. You have been through a lot, and you're very real and very vulnerable, and yet so hopeful through all of it. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. But before we do, I always love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and something fun that isn't normally in your bio.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of really interesting things about me because I'm a little bit all over the place. But two of my favorite things to tell. First thing, I am a twin, but we don't look anything alike.
Oh.
And she is almost 6 inches taller than me.
Oh my goodness. So definitely
Yes.
not identical.
No, and she stole my height and my organizational gene in utero. I'm just saying. But she's amazing and I love her. And then the other thing I love to tell people, because nobody believes it, but I have a black belt in martial arts, and I was actually an assistant instructor for a while too. Had to step out of it, but man, really, really, really love the opportunity to throw a couple of people down, and I can throw an assailant if I have to. Nobody believes it, but I can.
Okay, very good. So I will keep that in mind. I will not jump out at you. That is wonderful. That is wonderful. I love that. Definitely, I would not have expected the black belt for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to look forward to you throwing some people around next time we get together.
Too funny.
Yeah.
Too funny.
Well, and as I mentioned, you have a new book out, but at the end of the book, you say you didn't want to write it.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Why did you not want to write the book?
Oh, goodness. I didn't want to be known as infertility girl, I also, when you write a story that starts from a place of pain, it is really, you have to kind of relive it and you have to be in that headspace for a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't sure, I really wanted to go back through some of those things. And so, but the Lord was not going to let me not do it. and I kind of fought him for about 15 years, but it's coming out. So the e-book will be out November 19th, and the print copy will be out December 3rd, anywhere you find books. So I'm
Wonderful.
super excited.
Yes. Now, was there anything when you were writing this, was there anything that surprised you that you learned about yourself or about God while you were writing this? Because I know writing a book is quite a journey. It's quite a process, and you dive into a lot of different things. And I was just kind of wondering if there was anything that surprised you along that way.
I'm not really great at communicating with my husband.
Oh.
And you would think that I would have already learned that after, we're almost at 24 years of marriage.
32 here, and I still every now and again go, you would think we'd have a better handle on this by now.
Yeah. It was so funny. There are some things that, like, he's actually reading some of the portions of the book that he was in to make sure, hey, is this accurate? Were you good?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, you felt that way? And I was like, we never talked about that. So yeah, I learned I really probably need to communicate a little bit better with my husband.
Well, good. I'm glad you learned that now as opposed to waiting another 20 years.
No. But no, and seriously too, when you walk a path that's dark and then you go back to review it to write about it,
Hmm.
you really see where the Lord was close to you in that darkness in a special, special way. And
Mm.
so, I just, even more so than before, just God's faithfulness and his love, and that, he doesn't waste one tear or one dark moment, but he's going to use it for our good and his glory. And so, it really was an opportunity to, just see his hand even in the hard things and be thankful for that.
That reminds me of the Footprints poem, where
Yeah.
the guy looks back and says, "Hey, you know what? There's all these. Then those. There's only one set of footprints when it was really, really hard. Where were you?" And God says, "That's where I carried you. Those were my
Mhm.
footprints, not yours. I didn't leave
Yeah.
you. I was carrying you." And that's what it. When you said that, I was like, "Oh, that is the first image that came to mind." And that and the saying when they say hindsight's 2020. Because, yeah, when you're in the middle of something very difficult, you really kind of have a set of blinders on. It's very difficult to see the forest for the trees, for anything else other than your pain, because it's so up in your face. It's hard to see anything else. So I can see where that would be painful to relive, but also very sweet to see where God was moving where you couldn't see him before.
Yes. Well, and then it helps me now too. So when I'm going through dark times now,
Hmm.
it's given me a new vision for what God's doing now and is showing me some of the things that, like, hey, don't lose sight of the present right now. Just because things are hard, there's still goodness and there's still things you can be thankful for right here. So
Hmm.
don't go running into the what if in the future, or don't regret of the past or any of those things, or don't guilt yourself, but really focus and be here in the present and see the good things and see how I'm working and see how I'm near you now. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and we've alluded to it. We've mentioned you have a book, and we've mentioned that it came from a place of pain and it was very difficult, but we haven't said what that is or what the name of the book is yet. So we probably ought to let people know what is the name of the book and what is it about.
yeah, it's called Difficult to Conceive, A Godly Perspective for the Road Ahead.
Hmm.
And it's a book for women dealing with infertility, because I have an infertility story. I
Hmm.
am blessed that I do have three kiddos, but two of my precious babies are in vitro fertilization babies
Okay.
because I had two tubal pregnancies, one
Mm.
in each of my tubes, and they both ruptured.
Yeah.
And my husband a few times told me, hey, especially that first one, you probably could have died. And I was like, Psh, you're just being over dramatic. And then later on, when I was looking back at it and I'm writing this story, I'm like, oh yeah, I lost a lot of blood. I
Actually,
really probably could have died
I
there,
probably could have. Oh, yeah, it probably better that you didn't realize that then. That would have been even more
Probably.
on top of everything. So, yeah, I can't imagine. I was very blessed. There was only a couple of months where we were trying to have another baby, and I remember the disappointment. Oh, no, I'm not yet. Oh, I'm not. And then I remember thinking at one point I was like, this is only a few months. The idea of knowing that I couldn't at all, or people that struggle with the infertility for years. Uh, it was just like, wow, that is a special kind of pain. I could, I was reading, could identify with just a tiny little sliver, because I admit that I haven't been there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and because my story's a little different, I
Mm-hmm.
lost my infertility through a like trauma. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't not
Mm-hmm.
like but I mean that those were two traumatic events in my
Yeah.
life,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was done. A lot of this for women, it's a long, dark, unknown process,
Yeah.
and it is wrestling out with God, crying out to Him, and just
Mm-hmm.
it's it's deep sadness because your body was created to support and and have life in it in that
Yeah.
way.
Hmm.
And so if you created me to want this, and if you created me to do this, why are you not doing this for me? It is
Hmm.
so, so hard.
Yeah, it really is. And one of the things that I appreciated that I wanted to bring up, you mentioned the questions. Because sometimes in the church, it's almost like, oh, well, how dare you question God? If you question God, you're a horrible Christian. How dare you? He's going to strike you down in judgment because you should just simply trust him, be happy, happy, and be fine, and just be grateful for what you have, and just kind of, but you don't question God. You don't ask the why question. You can ask different questions, but not ask why because we don't understand that. And then there's almost like this guilt of, but I want to ask why. I want to understand. I don't get it. And you mentioned that asking questions, honest questions of God, doesn't have to drive us away. It can actually bring us closer to Him. And I really liked how you talked about the questioning that way.
Yeah, yeah. In my life, when I felt far from him because I had all of these questions, and and in some ways I wanted to ask him, in other ways I didn't. In some ways I wanted to be near to God because I knew who he is, but
Hmm.
he also could have solved my problem. He could have just said, okay, that baby didn't implant in your tube, it implanted in your uterus, or, and so to love a God who is able to do, he could have
Hmm.
protected those lives and he chose not to. It's confusing, it's hard.
Yeah.
And when you're unwilling to ask those questions, why, or I don't understand, or it keeps a distance between you and the Lord. Because there's,
Hmm.
you know that with our
Oh, yeah.
friends, right? When
Yeah.
when we get into a disagreement or somebody we think has hurt our feelings and we don't say, hey, why did this happen? Or hey, I don't understand, there's this distance. Even we could be in the same room, but there's still this distance. And the
Hmm.
same thing happens with the Lord when we're unwilling to come to him and just say, I don't understand. And I think the picture that I love thinking about when discussing this is when Jacob is wrestling with the Lord, right?
Yeah.
So he just refuses to let go. He's
Hmm.
like, I'm not going to let go. I'm not going to let go until you bless me. And that's what we're doing when we're coming to the Lord in the right attitude when we're asking. I mean, you can go, why, God? And, not be wanting to listen. That's the wrong attitude. But when you really are just like, Lord, this hurts and I don't understand. And I'm going to cling to you until you bless me, until you help me understand, or even if you don't give me the answer, until I hear what I need to hear from you. And because he's the God of all comfort, he says that he's going to comfort us, but if we don't go to him, he can't comfort us.
Hmm.
And the way we need to go to him is just take our questions. He's big enough to handle that. I mean, you look at
Yes.
what Jeremiah did in Lamentations, right? Or so many of the psalmists and all over the Psalms are like, why, God, you feel like an enemy, you this, you that. And God doesn't go, these people, I'm writing them off, right?
Yeah.
No, he's like, I'm here with you. I'm here with you.
Yeah.
I'm here with you. I have a plan. Trust me, trust me.
Yeah, I like to tell people sometimes too that he can handle our anger too. I mean, he can handle it if we are because I think it's very natural to go, "Hey, if you have the power to change this, if you do and you didn't, it's a natural response to be kind of angry about it." And I tell people it's like God's not up there in heaven chewing his fingernails going, "Oh no, they're mad at me." He's not insecure in himself that he can't handle it. He's big enough to handle that. And he's big enough to say, I know you're angry. I'm still here. And it's okay. Just keep working with me here and we'll get through this.
Yeah, take your anger to him. Don't,
Yes.
don't bottle it up
Mm-hmm.
because that's the problem. I
Yeah.
mean, often we're just like, well, I'm mad at God. And then we go talk to everybody else and tell them that we're mad at God, but we don't talk to God and tell him we're mad at God. Right.
Yes.
And so how about let's go to God and be like, I don't understand and I'm mad. And often once we start kind of releasing all of that, then suddenly we're like, okay, I think I'm done now. And then we can actually hear him. We're close enough to hear him. But if we're not coming to him with it, we're not going to hear his words. He's going to feel far away because we're creating a barrier.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that when I was wrestling, when there was a thing that happened in my family, and I was wrestling with God on this, and through it all, towards the end, it was like, oh, well, at least I kept the lines of communication open. I may have been angry. I may have been asking a lot of questions. I may have said, I don't like this. This stinks. I don't understand. But I was still talking to him. Like you said, I was still bringing it to him. We had some pretty open, not very pretty conversations, but we were still talking and searching and looking. And so then on the other side, it's like, okay, yeah, that wasn't pleasant. I really wish I could have learned my lessons another way, but we're a lot closer now
Yeah.
than we would have. And as you mentioned that, yeah, after going through and then looking back at all the things that he was there for, it just really, it helps you going forward too.
Definitely. Well, and you feel, that even in those dark times, like, right, when
Hmm.
you walk through the fire, he's with you. When you walk through the darkness, he's by our sides. He's never, ever away from us. And so, when you experience those moments where he's kind of whispering in your ear, either words of comfort or sometimes correction, then you're like, this is why I'm here. I'm
Hmm.
here to, yes, I needed to release my anger or whatever it is, but I'm really here so that he can guide and direct me, and he can be my father and my shepherd and the lover of my soul. So
Yeah. Earlier, I mentioned that one of the things that I liked, and I typed this quote up from the book, one of the reasons why it stuck out to me is because I'm guilty of it and I'm having to work through it. And I went, oh, she's stepping on my toes. I think God really wants me to pay attention here. So thank you for that gentle reminder or little
you're
cattle
welcome,
prod. You're
I
welcome.
guess.
But it talks about, you say here, hyper focusing on what you have lost or never had makes seeing the simple joys of each day very difficult. And I think even going into the holidays, whether we've gone through a traumatic or we're struggling with infertility, we can still get hyper focused on what's not right, what I'm not getting, what I wanted, what I don't have, whether it's material or emotional, relational, whatever. When we get hyper focused on that, you mentioned several times in the book about you were so hyper focused on wanting that child and why you didn't have one that you missed so many other things. And I appreciated that reminder of, oh, yeah, I can do that. I can focus on what I don't have instead of what I do have. And not to negate or minimize maybe something that I want that is good or something that I do desire doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, but to be hyper focused on it to the exclusion of everything else. It was a good reminder. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, have you gotten better about that? I'll
Well,
put
he
you on the spot.
reminds me. No, no, he reminds me so often. In fact, the other day I was sitting at a table in Chick-fil-A with my dad, and I had some what ifs flipping around in my head. And
Mm,
they brought us the food, and my dad stopped to pray for the food, and God was like tapping me on the shoulder, going, "You're so busy thinking about what ifs that you're not enjoying this time with your dad." Hello.
mm.
And so I still need reminders. Unfortunately, I'm not perfect in that respect. But he's so good. God is so good to give us the reminders we need to say,
Yeah.
look, you're missing out on some joy right here. Just open your eyes,
Hmm.
open your eyes. So
Yeah. I love that you felt like he was tapping you on the shoulder to go, okay, here you go. Don't forget to do this. And I think we will, I suspect many of us will have opportunities to practice that going forward through the holidays, but at any other time of the year too. It's not an exclusive phenomenon of the holidays. That can happen at any time.
yes, yes. Anytime we have something that just feels off or wrong in our life, or anytime we have a just a hard time that we're going through, it's so easy just to focus on that hard thing and all the bad things that go along with it. And we miss just the little moments,
Hmm.
that sometimes they're just, look, the sunlight, look at how beautiful the sunrise is, or look at
Yeah.
how beautiful the sunset is, or sometimes, and just sometimes we just need eyes to find the beautiful things that God is putting in our lives right now so that we can have the gratitude for what he's doing and what he's giving, but also so we can have joy even in those super hard times.
Yeah. Well, and you created a new word. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. I think it's Joy Stokers.
Stookers,
Yeah, Joy
something like
Stookers.
that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, tell us where that word came from and what you're talking about. Because we mentioned joy. When we hyper focus, we can lose our joy. So, what are some of those joy Stookers?
Yeah, well, the way that word came to be is my friend and I were talking, and I was trying to say steal and took, and suddenly it just became stuck instead of yes. So the things that can take or steal our joy, stookers, there's so many of them in our
Oh yeah.
lives, but
Mm-hmm.
a few of them, comparison is a huge one, right?
Yeah.
I want what she has. Why don't I have the three children or the car or the even just sometimes the singing voice or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is that we
Yeah.
think we need. We have a comparison problem.
Yeah.
The what ifs, what if this happens, what if that happens? We're so focused on the future we can't see what God's doing now. The if only I could have this, if only I could have,
Yeah.
if only something was different. We do that too to ourselves.
Yeah.
One of the other ones that I love, I'm not sure if this one's in the book, but it should have been if it's not. And see, look, I just did it to myself. I call it shoulding. Don't
Yeah.
should, do not should on yourself
Yes.
because you're just carrying around guilt that you don't need to be carrying around.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, we do the best we can with the help of the Holy Spirit, but don't should on yourself. It just makes a mess and it
Yeah.
and it keeps us feeling yucky and it prevents us from experiencing the joy we have right here.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're not going to do everything perfect. That's okay. Jesus did it for us.
Yes.
And there's grace. And so let's live lives of grace for
Yeah.
ourselves and for others around us.
Oh, absolutely. And you talk about don't should on yourself. I have used that. And actually, there was one time my husband said that I should. I was like, don't should on me. I said it to him. I said, don't, just
That's
don't.
perfect.
Yeah, don't do that. And the other thing that brings to mind is years ago, I was at another event for something, and they talked about when we say, I should, I have to, I need to, already when you say that, there's this heaviness, there's this obligation. Whereas if we can spin that around and reframe it to, I get to, I want to, or I choose to, because she brought up the example of taxes. Well, I have to pay my taxes. No, you really don't. Now, the consequences of not are pretty severe, so you might want to choose to do them to avoid the consequences. But the empowerment of saying, I get to, I want to, I choose to, there's so much, it's more of a positive spin on, you may be doing the same thing, but you're doing it with a different mindset. And boy, I will still catch myself so many times of, oh man, I have to do. No, I get to do, I choose to do, of just automatically trying to reframe that. Because I started noticing just how often I would use those phrases. Oh man, I should do this. Or, you go, oh, well, okay. Or I got to do this. And it's almost always accompanied with this ugh kind of feeling.
Yes.
Oh
It's
man, I should.
I kind of liken it to some form of guilt, whether,
Yeah.
I'm never going to live up to the standard or anything. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, Romans 8:1 tells us that there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And so when we cling to those shoulds, that totally messes up our ability to live for God and humble gratitude. It makes
Mm-hmm.
it a drudgery. And so getting to say, yes, I get to now. Here's the thing. I hate dishes. I don't want to ever do dishes. If I could never do a dish, I would cook to make everybody happy. But if somebody would just come along behind me and
And do
clean
all
up
the
after
dishes.
me,
I
I
like that
would
idea.
love it. I think that I need to have a live-in sous chef of some sort, but I don't. And so no matter how much I've tried to convince the people living in my house, they just don't believe me that that should be the case. But,
They
well,
are not
but
cooperating with your plan.
No, but if I say, you know what, I get to do the dishes, or I am so thankful that I have food to put on these dirty dishes, it totally changes
Hmm.
where my heart is and my perspective. It doesn't change the circumstances. I still
No.
get to wash the dishes,
Dishes have still got to
but
be done.
I now am thankful that I have food, or that I have dishes, or that I have
Yes.
clean water, or that I get to wash them in a sink instead of taking them down to the river, or whatever it is.
Hmm.
It's suddenly there's just a difference in my attitude and in the way I get to carry my life and go on. And I get to then reflect the glory that
Yes.
God is back to Him, which is what we really want with our lives,
Oh
right?
yeah. And in some seasons you get to tell your children to do it as a chore to build their character.
Yes, definitely. And I have my children do get to wash dishes some. It's just, when they're that busy, sometimes it's really hard to
Yeah.
get them in the home long enough to wash the dishes. They're barely home there
Been
to eat
there,
the
done
food
that
off
as
of the
well.
plates.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard enough to get them there long enough to get the food off the plate. That
That's
is
right.
that is very true. Well, one of the lines, another line that you wrote in here that you mention it with infertility, but it really, I was like, you could just kind of put a blank there, and you could use it for anything. And it said gratitude. Gratitude will not change the fact that you are dealing with infertility or anything, but it can change how infertility or whatever you're dealing with deals with you. And I wrote that down. I was like, wow. Yeah, and we mentioned that reframing and how the gratitude can totally change how you see the whatever the challenge that you're dealing with is and make it a different experience.
Definitely. Well, and I think, God always tells us that the darkness isn't just there for darkness, right? He's growing something new, He's creating something good in our lives. And I think that so often we can let those dark times or those hard times grow bitterness, or grow, or make us just not grow more and more like Jesus. And so when we can find the little bit of things to be thankful for, when we can, and it's a small change in our brain. It really isn't a huge difference. But when we do that, it opens up wide vistas of God's hand working in our lives, of beauty in the darkness, of
Mm,
opportunities to experience joy, even in the midst of the hardest things.
yeah.
And so I'm going through an especially hard time right now, just other things. And it's so fascinating that God has me doing this. I'm working on a new book about growing joy in the darkness. And He's like, well, if you're going to write it, you need to have a way to make sure that you're writing it well, that it really works. And He has just been all up in my grill going, these are the things you're writing about, Angela. And if it's not true now where you are, then it's not ever true. And so I'm even seeing it now in this new hard season, that
Mm,
God is working in beautiful, beautiful ways. And I am so thankful for the way He's doing what He's doing and how He's doing it, because I get to walk through a new season. It's hard. It's not fun. I
yeah.
wish it were different. Don't get me wrong. I cry, I rail, I do all the things. It's not like I'm perfect and going, oh, yay, this is so
Happy,
fun.
happy, joy, joy, because we're going through a tough time. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
No,
right.
that's not
That's not,
reality.
no, that's not real. But I am seeing His nearness to me in such special ways that I would
Mm.
have missed out on if I wasn't walking this journey.
Yeah. Well, I am glad that he is showing himself to be close to you during this difficult time, as much as I wish you were not going through the difficult time. And hope, but that's life. Where so many times we have two things that we're holding at the same time, the joy and the sadness. That there's so many times that we hold both. And so whatever I can do to continue to encourage you, and I know you were encouraged along the way as you wrote this book. So I would love to ask you the question that I like to ask everyone is, what would you say to encourage someone to pursue the passion that God has placed in their heart? Because you mentioned that you kind of wrestled with Him, but God definitely put this passion to share this book in your heart, and you did. You carried it out.
Yes. God's timing and God's purposes are so opposite of our own And so trust him with that timeline. Trust him. One of the things when I was going through infertility, and even that I even think about now, I read Carol Kent's book, When I Lay My Isaac Down.
Mm.
And a lot of it is about putting our hopes and our dreams on that altar of God and
Yeah.
trusting him with the fire and seeing what lasts and what doesn't. And when you stand back and whatever hope or dream that is, whatever he's put in your heart, you stand back and let him put it on the altar, even though you want to snatch it back a million
Oh,
times and
yeah.
say, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. It
No,
needs to be
no, no.
different. We need to do this a different way. God, no, 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 no. He will burn what isn't of him. And then he's going to give it back to you in such an amazing way that you're
Mm.
going to go, holy moly, this is way different and way bigger and way better than I would have ever done my own.
Yeah.
So trust him, even if it looks like fire, even if it looks hard, trust him because he's gonna honor that and he's gonna give it back to you way better than what you ever thought it would have been in the first place.
Yeah, and more than likely refined because it talks about you heat up, stuff and you skim off the impurities, and that's where I say I've got scorch marks on my backside. But yeah, I mean sometimes I do. I feel like I've got scorch marks on my
Oh,
backside
frequently.
because boy, the heat's been turning up and he's trying to burn some stuff off, and I'm like, ouch, that hurts. That's not fun. But that is some beautiful encouragement, and I love the image of putting it on the altar and then letting him burn off what isn't of him, so that he can give us back something that's even better than what we imagine. Well, Angela, thank you so much. It has been a delight as always. And if people want to get in touch with you, they want to get the ebook, the regular book, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
So I would love it if you would go to my website, rethinkingmythinking.com.
Okay.
And I have a newsletter there. You'll get a free 9-day devotional if you sign up for my newsletter. That's the best way to keep up with all things going on with me.
Okay.
And then the book, like I said, it'll be available as an ebook starting on November 19th on Amazon, and then it'll be available wherever books are sold in print on December 3rd. So,
Yay! Exciting! Exciting.
yes.
Well, I wish you the best with that and wish you the best in writing in book number 2. And thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time out to speak with us today.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. It's great.
Thanks so much for joining me today on A Woman's Heart. I hope you learned something from the conversation with Angela and find some things to be grateful for this week. With the holidays coming up and Thanksgiving next week, I'm giving myself a little break. I will encourage you to listen to the conversation I had with Amber Cullum about gratitude to get your heart ready for the holidays. You can also take the time to catch up on any other episodes you may have missed. I will include the link to her show in the show notes, along with how to connect with Angela and how to connect with me. I'm available to speak on a podcast or at an event. Until next time, I wish you and your family a happy Thanksgiving and look forward to sharing the Christmas series with you.